I've been doing some sketches of Thomas. Thomas is an apostle of Christ, and he is best known as Doubting Thomas, and for this reason he's sometimes depicted, particularly in Western art, as reaching out and touching the wound in the side of the crucified and risen Lord. And one of my difficulties with that is that although that's what he said he needed to do in order to believe, he didn't actually do it because he came to faith without doing it. He was able to see Christ and uttered that monumental declaration of faith, my Lord and my God. So I'm painting an icon of young Thomas. So we begin by finding the centre of the panel, and of course this is all 4 times the normal speed, so that we're not here for a couple of hours, only 35 minutes. And using the sketch that I did, just putting little pencil marks. Dividing the head into 4, getting the shoulder width 3/4 of a head length, getting the across the middle of the chest to the side of the arms 2 head lengths, and with some yellow ochre, water and a hog hair brush, get the basic shape working. Just 3/4 of a head length to get the size of the hand. This will be a bit different because the other hand is curled over around a scroll. And when it's dried, I wiped it over with sandpaper, cleaned it off. Just sort of knocks it back, but leaves the very faint lines. And I've added an egg yolk to the yellow ochre, and using a Kolinsky brush. The egg just makes the brush marks more obvious. Starting to work up the shaded areas. Well, while this is going on, let me say a little bit about Thomas. He is a disciple of Jesus, and he's mentioned in the 3 Gospels, Matthew, Mark and Luke, pretty much in passing. Whenever the list of disciples is made, of course he's listed there, sometimes referred to as the twin, Thomas the twin. One of the main stories that occurs is in John's Gospel. Well, several of them actually. There is a point where, apart from being named, there's the occasion where Thomas says to Jesus, "Lord, we do not know where you are going. How can we know the way?" Jesus said to him, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." And then after the resurrection in John chapter 20, we have the monumental story. Let me read it to you from the New Revised Standard Version. But Thomas, who was called the twin, one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the mark of the nails in his hands, and put my finger in the mark of the nails, and my hand in his side, I will not believe." A week later, his disciples were again in the house, and Thomas was with them, although the doors were shut. Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Do not doubt, but believe." Thomas answered him, "My Lord and my God." Jesus said to him, "Have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have come to believe." Well, here I've added a little bit of burnt umber to the yellow to make this start to do the shading in the particularly in the face and the hands of the icon. One of the traditions surrounding St. Thomas is that he was a missionary to India, and indeed there is a church that owes its origins to St. Thomas the Apostle. It is said that he was martyred in India. He may also, it is said, have travelled as far as China. Well, now, having got these darker lines in place, we'll just check them again and get some of the shading in place, and then with a mixture of golden ochre, a little bit of Ercolano red, we're putting in on coats of membrane, quite a few coats, as you can see, and that's a lot of coats later, and then we can start adding white, titanium white, to that mixture to start on the highlights. Each lot of highlights just a bit more titanium white. I've changed the position of the camera. I have worked out how to attach the webcam to a monopole which has the fixings on the end. So I just clamped it onto the easel, and it's actually working quite nicely. So going back to accentuate some of the shadows a bit more, with a bit mixing some of the burnt umber with the flesh tone. Gives a bit more definition. And now with the burnt umber, getting the outlines of the head working. More burnt umber and more hair. Let's put in the main lines of the sort of basic shapes of the hair. Let's define those fingers a bit more as well. Highlighting the eyes and the bottom of the nose, the mouth. Get that Adam's apple highlighted. Now the more dilute mix of the burnt umber, blocking in the hair. We'll add coat after coat until we can still see the main outlines of the hair. And this is a glaze. To the titanium white had washed out the face a bit, so put a glaze of the flesh tones over the top, fairly dilute. I tried flipping the image, and then it became clear to me that there was a problem with the hairline, that there was just it was too buffy on one side. It's interesting that getting a mirror image of something can change your perspective. I should have noticed it before, but it became more obvious when it was mirrored. So I took to it with some sandpaper and just adjusted it on both sides. And then we had a happier image. And then working some more highlight and the whites of the eyes. And you can see with the insert on the side there how I've worked the camera. It looks as if my head's going to bump into it, but it's actually not. It's a bit deceptive. I don't think I've ever bumped it with my head. Using Ercolano red to put in the crease and the eyelids and just under the mouth, under the nose and on the lips, and in the highlighted bits, and a bit of rouge on the cheeks. Pure white on one side of each eye, and a little bit more, tiny bit of more highlight with pure white in the most obvious places. I've used some Ercolano red with burnt umber to go over the hair again. Making a mixture of pigment and the egg tempera, grinding it with the mortar and pestle, and this is to make a little highlight for the hair. Now with burnt umber, working on the shading of the clothing. At this stage, thinking to follow pretty much what's in the original model I was working from. I'm not very happy with the folds and design and some of the colourings on the model, so I anticipate there being some adjustments to that colouring. Just putting in a few folds down here. Enjoy doing that. And the scroll. Make a bit of an adjustment there to the original scroll position. So with a more dilute version of the burnt umber, putting in shading so that the clothing or folds that are foremost, that will have the most highlight on, will come to the fore. The things that are behind get some shading in them. So in the original model, the undergarment is a very pale blue, and the outer garment fairly pale yellow. Yes, I will have the undergarment, well, I'm starting with a pale blue, but I actually want it to look white rather than blue. But a white garment does need sort of shading in it, so some pale blue shading, and the blue is ultramarine. So getting that coat on, because it's a lot of titanium white in it, it covers those the shades really effectively, quickly. Doesn't need more than 1.5 coats on that. with the same colour, starting the scroll as well. In the original model, the scroll is pink, and I think it's awful. Now the outer garment I'm doing in yellow ochre, and I put on a first coat, covered the whole lot in yellow ochre. Now subsequent coats would make that look brighter, and I think it looked awful. So in the well next door there was a little bit of burnt umber, so I added it, and it made it look a bit better, but not better enough, I don't think. So, more burnt umber. Now we're getting closer. Again, we want to put enough coats on so that the shading underneath can still be seen, but it's not very obvious. This is all being done with a large size 6, no, it's larger than that, it's a size yes, a size 6 brush. It's a Kolinsky brush. And now we're starting, we'll put a bit of titanium white, and now using a number 3 squirrel, much softer. Had I a large squirrel, I would have done the other undercoats with this softer brush as well. But hey, Kolinsky's very beautiful also. So we add more titanium white to the make further highlights. And more white. Just accentuating some of the shadows a bit more. This helps define the edges of the garment and where the folds are falling. And now for the undergarment. Still, this is very white, but there's still some of the blue in it to so that it's not brilliant white, not yet anyway. Now pure white. And on the scroll. I've gone back to use some of the blue tinted white in order to accentuate some of the shading. It had got a bit lost. Not always terrific about doing this decorative stripe on an undergarment. It's probably because I'm not very good at it, but on this occasion it actually needs it because it's all a bit bland otherwise. I'm using the pen with Ercolano red in it to decorate the yellow stripe, which was done with yellow oxide. But one of the things that I'm doing now is to use the Ercolano red to put some wrapping on some ties on the scroll. And the main reason for this is to balance up the two sides of the image. It needed something to lift the whole thing, hence the yellow stripe with the red decoration on it. But then it needed something for that to talk to on the other side, so use the same Ercolano red for ties on the scroll. Now for the background, and one of my new favourite colours is titanium grey, which is quite dark, and I didn't want it dark, so this is titanium grey and titanium white, and it will take a few coats, but it gives a nice even coverage. So I've said before, I need to turn an image upside down when I'm cutting in. Well, nearly there, and then the next job, when this is dry, comes the scary part of putting in the halo. And I like to turn him upside down for this, because we have our ruler padded, clamped in place, and there's a little hole, and I work out where it goes, and that's why it's scary. Something has gone wrong. The radius of the compass changed. I've reloaded it, but now I've got this scrunchy bit, horrible lick on the side. So sopping it up with a damp, not a wet, but a damp brush, and then painting over with the background paint. Then another disaster happened. As I took this off, the pad fell across the wet paint and made a mark at the top of the halo and on the edge of the Civitas. Bit more tidying up to do there. Then the inscription. Thomas. Well, there we have it. An icon of St. Thomas, apostle, missionary. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please leave a like, and even more importantly, love to get a comment. Look forward to seeing you next time.